Hey, what's up everybody? My name is Alckemy. Welcome to the channel. Today, you and I are going to be talking about the MPC Live 3. I think it's a good time to have this discussion because it's something that, for one, is new, it's exciting, everybody's getting the gas, the pads and stuff are really cool, it's got 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it's like, whoa, okay. Hard consideration for anybody that makes music on an external device outside of your typical DAW. I've got 4 major comparisons that we're going to be talking about today, but I'm not going to be doing the deep dive like I did with the Oxy one versus the Hapax because I'd be here all day. With that being said, there are some considerations that I want you to be aware of if you're in the market for buying something, and I think that it's just a good video to talk about. I do not have an MPC Live 3. However, if you look at my channel, I've had an MPC Live 1 and 2, and I've got plenty of videos on here of me doing all kinds of things that are sound design related, beat making, finger drumming, masterclass, which this is, it was older, but done a lot. So I know the MPC very well. I've also experienced things like the Polyend Play. I currently own a Digitac 2, a Digitone 2, and one of my favorites, which is an iPad. So which thing is right for you? And let's go ahead and kind of open that up. First off, should you upgrade between the MPC Live 2 and 3? My first consideration would be, can you sell the MPC Live 2 at a decent price in order for you to upgrade? Because otherwise, I think so. I like the touch strip. I like that there are XY pads on the 16 drums. There's a dedicated step sequencer, which checks the biggest box for me, which is the nudging. That was my biggest issue with sequencing on the MPC Live 2, is that the nudging aspect of it had to be done through the touchscreen, and that wasn't really my favorite. The big issue that still runs into me with this, before I continue on, is that it's wanting to do this much, but it limits you and has these really hard stops that are kind of cumbersome to work with. So I do think that it's a worthy upgrade if you can sell your MPC Live 2. I do like the microphone and all that other stuff, but it doesn't change the core issues of what I had within the Live 2, which is why I ended up trading it out for the Digitac and ultimately an iPad. So here's the thing. The MPC wants to do everything. It wants to be pretty much a DAW that is in a box outside of that. The problem is that, for me personally, is that I'm somebody that makes everything from scratch. I'm somebody that does really intricate and heavy sound design. And as welcome as the upgrade is for 8 gigabytes of RAM, there's a couple of new synths, I believe. I love that they added a clipper. That was actually a really big thing for my consideration about being like, yo, should I buy back into the MPC Live 2? But the big issue is that it still only has 4 inserts, and the modulation capabilities are unique to the synths that you're using for the most part. There are some caveats to it. So for example, if you're using pads and stuff, you can use inserts per pad, but assigning those LFOs and all that other stuff to it is not very streamlined, to where it's more of a headache than it is to do something else. If you are somebody that samples and primarily focuses on gathering external sounds and loading it into this, then I think that there is a nice middle ground for you to kind of have half of a DAW that also now has a timeline. It supports, 16 audio tracks, 24 MIDI tracks, if I'm not mistaken, which is pretty cool. I haven't messed with the MPC Live 3 software, so I don't know how it deals with loading a sample somewhere, being able to reverse it, or being able to time stretch it on the timeline. That would be a hard consideration. But even still, I feel like, for me, as far as I could probably take this and be satisfied with it for what the time is worth, I would be doing 2 things. Either A, building a kit that I could perform and finger drum with, to which I can finger drum decent. 2, using it as a sketch tool, and then later taking my project to something else, right? To Bitwig or Ableton or whatever it is that I use. The problem with this lies in the integration for the second thing that I mentioned. because when you plug this in, it goes into controller mode, and there is a live software that kind of acts as a plugin, but I haven't had the best experience with it as far as navigation. I've actually messed up my project several times because of that. And I think that making the, I guess, dynamism, interactivity between the thing and the computer has not been the most successful for me personally. This is where the Digitact comes in. This is where the iPad comes in. For me, the Digitact has a fraction of the features that this thing offers. Granted, it's $600 cheaper, but what this really does is it focuses less so on here's, a bunch of effects and here's your timeline and whatever. And instead is like, here's a really solid sequencer. Here is a way to do really cool things like sample locking, to where this has your XY pads, but this, you can change any of these steps into practically any sample that's loaded within your bank, and provides very quick access to building your track and doing the sketching. And so the streamline aspect of that, and not only that, but the overbridge with the synchronization works almost seamless with a DAW. So it makes more sense for me to use something like the Digitact, especially with the sequencing options and the offset and the nudge and the micro timing and all that other stuff. Very difficult to beat. That being said, it's not perfect. Getting samples in here, you can't drag samples from the DAW to the timeline and whatever. But once you have stuff in here, then this is like one of the fastest sketch tools that you have available. Now, what is this missing? Obviously a timeline, obviously a whole suite of effects, to where this technically has 8, but it doesn't have cool things like complex filters, or it doesn't have nearly the amount of sound design capabilities, unless if you have a Digitone. But even then, it's more so of a means of quick access as opposed to going really deep within it. It's not to say that with a lot of legwork and elbow grease that you can't get really cool things out of it. It's just what is worth it to you. I think that it's much easier for me to get my sample packs and stuff and load it in there and do the sequencing, as opposed to trying to do the sound design within and come up with new stuff. It's just, it's a matter of efficiency. So the other thing that's really important to discuss with this is that it doesn't have a battery. It also doesn't have external speakers. This does. The Live 2 does as well. And you can get about 3 to 4 hours, I would say. They advertise 6 hours on the MPC Live 2. I don't know how this fares. I haven't read what this is promising. But yeah, I've gotten about 3 to 4 hours with not doing too much crazy stuff of the box outside itself. The thing is like, it is portable, but it's also huge. So you need a really big backpack if you're going to go to the park, or, sit down and do your sound design or beat make on the couch, to where introduce this thing. Now, this thing is probably the most advanced portable technology for music making that exists on the market currently. And I've got plenty of videos on iPad stuff. This is your best bridge to having a DAW that is not attached to a laptop. It's got Cubases, it's got Drambo, it has FL Studio Mobile, it's got Logic Pro for iPad, which for me, I prefer, of all things, Cubases, just because of the audio editing and the workflow and whatever. But it has the entire suite of plugins that you could possibly want. No, it doesn't have Faceplant or Serum, but it has things that are almost as equivalent. And Drambo is basically Bitwig in, it's not even Bitwig Lite, it's like Bitwig Mini, but just as deep. It's got speakers, it's got a portable battery. The battery lasts longer than everything else. But what you don't have on this are, the pads and the connectivity, which is one of the biggest considerations. As a means of getting this to talk to your computer, I mean, it is a computer, so it pretty much just syncs to your DAW, and you can run it as a MIDI effect, or you can run it as external audio, pretty much whatever you want. Patterning 3 is the best drum sequencer that I have ever used. There is a desktop version of this, and I have yet to see something better that is as fluid and as deep as, sorry, I'm waiting for my keyboard to turn on. There we go. There's a desktop version as well, but this on the couch, thank you so much for the follow. is pretty much unparalleled. I've got tons of videos about this as well, but the ability to make beats super fast based off of this grid and do offsets and whatever is just insane. And this is just a plugin that can be part of your DAW or Drambo or, heaven forbid, Koala Sampler or all of that stuff, right? This is, yeah, so this is the meta, I would say. This is the most fun interactive, and the MPC kind of sits somewhere in between, and that's why I say that it's built for very specific workflows that people enjoy. I wouldn't even say like you either love it or hate it. It's just, here's what it does. You can't really go wrong, but I have messed with everything. I have also messed with the Polyend Play, to which the Polyend Play is cool. I didn't have the best experience with getting samples onto the thing, and I also didn't have the Plus at the time, so I was wondering why all my samples were messed up. It's because it was converting everything to mono, and like half of the samples that I made and the expansion packs and stuff didn't work. That drove me crazy. That being said, the Polyend Play does really well at generative sequencing, and so there's a lot of cool ways to say, hey, create a pattern and then modify it and then mutate it and so forth. And that was the biggest appeal, that I was like, wow, this is really cool. It's also the lightest of everything. Actually, I would say maybe, yeah, I do think that it's actually lighter than the iPad Pro. But that's just a consideration of, all right. I also think that it can upload the least amount of samples compared to everything else. So if you're in the market for a Polyend Play, that would be something that you could consider as well. And I'm talking about the Digitact, but this also applies to, you know, anything Elektron related as far as sequencing goes, right? Because once you know one, you pretty much know them all. So this can be compared to the Octatrack or whatever, the Tonverk, if that's what you're wondering. I don't have one, so I'm not going to speak about that, but the workflow is still almost exactly the same. So if you're on a budget, Koala Sampler, that's the number one thing. Grab Koala Sampler. It's about 15 bucks for a fully featured thing that works very similarly to the MPC. It can have up to 128 different pads over 4 banks and has, you know, clipper built in. It has pretty much almost every kind of audio warping. It has your slicing, it has your chopping, it has all of that, and it's so cheap. So if you're looking for the true mobile experience and you don't have an iPad, but you have an iPhone, which is what I'm recording with, 15 bucks is going to save you so much money. So much money. Koala Sampler is a G. If you do have an iPad and you're looking for really high-end sequencing and all that stuff or whatever, you can't go wrong with Patterning 3. The difference, though, is that Patterning 3 is specifically meant for drums, as opposed to something like the Oxy 1 that you can use just to plug in generative or general data. So there's that. I'm not really comparing the Oxy 1 or throwing this in here because this only does sequencing with MIDI. It's not an all-in-one groove box, right? So as much as I love this, we can't really mention that. So if you're curious about that, you can go watch my other videos. Here's what I did, though. And I think this is probably the most important thing. I've had a lot of gear that I've bought and sold over time. And the reason why I have my setup now is because I'm trying to convince myself that I don't need the MPC Live 3. No, I'm just kidding. Is because this is what I found works for me. This is for on the couch. This is for when I want to do things that are working within, I guess like a step sequencer. This, I usually use the Oxy 1 for MIDI sequencing as a means of finding melodies and cool rhythms and all that other stuff. And the big kahuna of everything that drives the sound design of everything that I wanted inside of something like an MPC ended up becoming the Waldorf Iridium Core. And so this takes care of all of the hardware sound design that I wanted the MPC Live to do, because this has what, 6 LFOs, it's got 3 oscillators, it's got fully featured FM, it has granular, it has wavetable stuff, which I don't think that I think the MPC added something like that, but you can't make your own wavetable or something of the sort. But this took care of all of my sound design needs, which is doing what? Serving what purpose? Everything is a means to get back into the DAW to finish the project. And so all of this other stuff has become these sketch tools that I've been utilizing. If you want to go all in and you want that full DAW-less experience with a lot of hardware and whatever, then your middle ground is going to most likely be the MPC Live 3. But if you're trying to make shit like Neurobass, you're trying to design your own drums from scratch that hit really hard, you can make them, you know. And I think that if you're up for resampling and you use all of the effects, which you can technically use 8 or 16 if you're taking, like, if you make a template to where you can do stuff like you have your pads, then you have the group. And you can, on each pad, you can have 4 inserts. And then on the group, you can have 4 inserts. And then on, it expands into the track, I think, which has 4 inserts or something like that. And then you have the project or the returns that have 4 inserts. And so if you get into this recycling thing or resampling thing, you can, but you have to jump around to access those effects. And that kind of bothers me. I'm also not sure if they fixed the automation problem that I had, to where the automation was all steps and there was no interpolation of like smooth transitions. It was all just like really minimal steps, which drove me crazy. It makes sense whenever you're making basses that are supposed to be morphing and whatnot. I will say, if the MPC Live adds more inserts or they add a dedicated morphing filter that has built-in LFOs, I don't even need randomizers. I need LFOs, which they were on the right track with the parametric EQ. I might consider jumping back into the MPC Live 3. But what I found that works for me is doing all my sound design in the DAW. That's, well, most of it. If I'm going to do stuff into the Digitact, I do all my sound design in the DAW or get everything to the computer first and then there. This, I can do sound design and beat making all together. Like, this does everything. Yeah, it literally does everything. And if you want a buyer's list of all the plugins that I would recommend, I can do that for you, but let me know in the comments. It's not as fun, I'll say that, other than patterning. Like, I like to see the lights and the, you know, screen and the things interactive with this box or whatever that looks really pretty. I mean, a lot of people gave it shit for it looking like a thing that's straight out of the 90s. But I'm a 90s kid, and I like this kind of stuff. And I love the colors and whatever. But it's just not as fluid as far as like actually throwing a track together. And there's so many menus to dive through. They're usually only like, it's usually only a button press away. But even still, that's something that you really have to get through for it to not block you. So whatever you choose, I think that the biggest thing for consideration is if you're trying to adopt an MPC workflow, take all of the bells and whistles away and focus on doing a couple of things. One is building a kit and preparing for it in a way that is going to help kickstart your ideas. Because the MPC workflow in general revolves off of, well, a couple of key concepts, right? Which is usually sampling, drums, and some kind of chops that are the beat idea. So if you take inspiration from that and you build up a drum kit or whatever that is your kick, snare, hi-hat, drum stuff, then you have another bank or another group or, you know, whatever you want to call it that has a bunch of different either basses or, you know, sampled songs or, you know, things that you can apply to build your hook. Then it doesn't really matter what approach you take. You can't really go wrong with it. You know what I mean? I think this thing looks really dope. I think it's sick and would love to be able to mess around with one again, but I don't want to pay that hefty price point to potentially be disappointed that the changes and stuff aren't enough for me. So with that being said, if you want any more information on any of the stuff that I've actually had, made music with, released music with, all that other stuff, let me know, because I'm somebody that has put the time into messing with these things to give you an honest review over any of the gear. I don't have any affiliate links for you. I don't have anything to sell you. This is just an open conversation about somebody that has experience. So thanks so much. Let me know what your thoughts are, and I will see you all in the next one. Oh, if you want to support the channel, check out alckemy.com for my sounds. See ya.